If you feel like finding the right golf ball to play is confusing, you're right, it is. With so many different tools, resources, and guides out there telling you which ball is right for you, you'll never truly know which ball is best until you actually hit them. In this video, I'll be working to find the best ball for me in the Titleist lineup. Let's go. Welcome to the first part of this golf ball testing journey where I'm ultimately on the search to find the best golf ball for my game. I thought I would tackle this process a little bit differently than I've seen in the past and work my way through each of the individual brands in order to find out the best golf ball that they have to offer me. I'll be comparing the results from this test with what a variety of ball fitting tools say it should be, because whether you're just curious, have a bias towards a particular brand, or have just been playing the same ball all along, there's a decent chance that you're leaving some performance on the table. To test this, I'm going to be working through each of the golf balls in the 2025 lineup, the Pro V1, the Pro V1X, and the Pro V1X Left Dash. So the next thing up is, what do the fitting guides say is the best thing for me in the Titleist lineup? Well, uniquely enough, in a previous video I did where I used the Ballnamic platform in order to determine the top 5 choices that they were able to recommend from their database, it was determined that the first and second best matches for my numbers were the 2025 Pro V1X followed by the Left Dash, while the Titleist ball fitting tool determined the Pro V1 was the best fit. And lastly, if we're looking at My Golf Spy, which is one of the best known review websites out there, they determined that each of the Pro V, Pro V1X, and the Left Dash were all within the top 3 in their respective low spin and mid spin categories. So from here, the only thing left to do, and the only way to really know what golf ball will best fit our game, is to see what fits, what feels, and then what ultimately looks the best through the air in order to pick what golf ball we want to put in the bag. To do that, I'll be hitting a pitch, a full wedge, 6-iron, and a driver, capturing 4 shots for each of those clubs in order to hopefully differentiate the performance for each of these golf balls throughout the test. Additionally, I'm going to be spending some time on a putting green, hitting some lag putts and some short putts in order to see if anything stands out in particular with one of these golf balls, and then ultimately trying to determine the best option in the lineup by referencing TrackMan's PGA Tour averages as well as my own individual feedback. Here we go. First up for the pitch shot, let's talk about feel. There are some obvious differences between the 3 balls in this category, and with the Pro V1 coming in at the softest and the Left Dash by far being the firmest of the 3 golf balls. If you didn't notice in any of the shot videos themselves, you can have a listen here doing the bounce test and see if you can tell a difference between any of the 3 golf balls. Of the 3 golf balls, everything was pretty much in line with what they had advertised on their website, with the Pro V1 coming in at the softest and the Left Dash was pretty much like a rock. As we dig into the launch numbers, we can see there's an immediate separation between these three golf balls with a pretty even, roughly 2-degree split. The lowest coming out just over 28 degrees, while the highest launching Pro V1 was coming out a little over 30 degrees. We could see a spin separation of just under 800 RPM, with the highest being the Pro V1X at just over 6,800, and the left dash just barely clearing 6,000 RPM itself. From a profile standpoint, and ultimately I'm kind of quantifying this in the sense of like, what window is that ball coming out of? Like, does this ultimately fit the apex that I'm looking to achieve for each of these different shot types, or for the golf ball that I'm looking to select? And all three profiles were acceptable. However, with me and my game, I do have an issue with launching the golf ball too high pretty much across the board. And so seeing that Pro V1X come out at a lower angle and maintain a higher spin, it was definitely something where it suited my eye much more. And this is not even taking the golf ball outside to test yet and see how it performs on actual grass. So we're going to move on to the pitching wedge and see how each of these three break out. Looking at feel first off the pitching wedge, a less dramatic difference between the Pro V1 and the Pro V1X than the pitch shot, as far as I was able to tell. I think there was some slight audio differences between the two golf balls, but in comparison to the left dash, in a completely different class of their own. The left dash, again, living through that like a rock motto that I'm pretty sure it was created off of, because every single shot that I was hitting, I knew I was hitting something, and I didn't necessarily like it at any point in time. That also, you could see that come out in the ball speed numbers as well, with the left dash being about 3 miles an hour or more faster than either of the other golf balls. So not really in line with what I'm looking for when I'm selecting a ball, but still we're going to test it nonetheless. Looking at the launch numbers for this, everything was in a degree, so nothing really that stood out too dramatically between the three of them. However, overall apex, as a result of that higher ball speed, it did carry that golf ball to about a 10-foot higher overall apex in comparison to the two other golf balls. Now, if we look at spin numbers here, again, the Pro V1X standing in a class of its own, about 800 RPM difference between the highest spinning golf ball as the Pro V1X and the lowest spinning Pro V1. The left dash was able to find a good middle ground, coming in at around 8,400 RPM, pretty much smack dab in the middle. And I'm not really sure if this breaks out the engineering differences with these golf balls and how they're creating them to try to fit each individual type of golfer that exists out there. So hopefully put them in a golf ball that will best suit them and their game. It's pretty interesting to see how evenly these spin numbers are divided throughout this entire set. So something that we'll definitely keep an eye on going forward. And then lastly, looking at the profile, again, in an effort to try to keep that ball a little bit lower in the air and try to chase those numbers on the TrackMan PGA Tour averages. The lowest launching, high spinning ball I'm seeing in general is going to be the theme for this video, and that's going to be the Pro V1X coming in at 26 degrees of launch and then 8,800 RPM of spin, in comparison to the TrackMan numbers that we're ideally looking for a pitching wedge, being around 24 degrees and 9,300 RPM of spin. So we're getting pretty close there. The apex, however, is pretty close in line with that PGA Tour average, which is something that I'm hoping to work towards throughout this entire bag. Kicking things off with the 6-iron, everything was pretty much in line with the experience that I had with the pitching wedge, with the Pro V1 and the Pro V1X. The left dash, however, was pretty much worse than the experience I had with the pitching wedge, and I think honestly made me swing the golf club worse because of the fact that I just did not like how it felt at impact, and I think I might have subconsciously been trying to change the way that I was ultimately hitting the ball in order to make it feel a little bit better in one way or another. So all that aside, looking at the launch numbers with 1 degree of overall separation, with the X again coming out at the lowest, which I'm really starting to love. Especially in the 6-iron here, I feel like I'm not having to work quite as hard to stay on top of the ball, to keep it down, in comparison to a lot of other golf balls that I have played in the past, where I feel like they just go way too high for me, and it forces me to try to swing differently in order to get that trajectory that I'm ultimately going for. Next up here, looking at the spin, with a very similar separation with the pitching wedge, this time with the interval being right around 300 RPM, with again the X coming in as the highest spinning golf ball and the left dash this time as the lowest spinning ball. The profile with these 3 golf balls as a whole was relatively similar. The only major difference that I was able to pull out of it was just the left dash being a little bit more difficult for me to hit. And I don't know, again, if that's playing into the subconscious thing of me not really liking it, but it did take 4 or 5 more shots than the Pro V1 and the Pro V1X in order to get a solid data set out of that golf ball. The apex in general was pretty much similar across the board. The only major differences, again, just looking at a lower launch again for the Pro V1X and a higher spin again compared to the other 3 with the Pro V1X. This ultimately left us, in comparison to our TrackMan baseline, of a 4 to 5 degree separation on launch from those numbers and a 500 RPM to 1200 RPM difference in ultimately the numbers that we're looking to try to get close to in order to select the golf ball that's best suited for my game going forward. Let's keep going to the driver. The feedback differences for all three of these golf balls definitely re-emerged, with each of them feeling and sounding quite a bit different from one another. The left dash again was ultimately the firmest of the three and felt almost dead coming off the driver, and it made it difficult to actually know either where I was striking it on the face or ultimately where that ball was going to be ending up. So looking at the launch numbers here for the Pro V1 and the Pro V1X, we can see that the launch numbers were relatively similar, with the Pro V1X coming out a little bit flatter than the Pro V1. The left dash, however, was pretty much falling off the planet, and I found myself during the set, and despite being a little bit fatigued at this point in time, but I was having to change my swing in order to get that golf ball to perform in any capacity. You can see it was quite a bit offline, and really that was me just having difficulty just trying to heave it up in the air, just given the angle that it was launching at, but as well as how low spin that golf ball ultimately was. If we look at the spin numbers, we can really see the spin was for the left dash was hardly holding on, with just an average of 1700 RPM. I saw shots dipping as low as 1300, which granted I could have changed the driver setting to accommodate that performance, but that's ultimately not how you want to be fit to a golf ball. You don't want to fit the golf ball to your driver. You want to fit it to the rest of your set and then have your driver be fit to that golf ball. That's pretty much the guidance that I've gotten over the years. Despite having never really done a golf ball fitting myself, that's just kind of what's been passed on to me. The Pro V1 and the X, however, did great, with a couple of the hard hit ones hanging on the low 2000s, which did pretty well as far as carry distance and total distance. And then ultimately the consistency I was seeing out of those strikes was better overall as a whole. Now, looking at the profile for these three balls, I think I can comfortably exclude the left dash at this point in time, just based on the performance that we've gotten in the vast majority of these shots. But I did really feel a huge difference when hitting the Pro V1 and the Pro V1X. The Pro V1 was coming out visibly higher in comparison to the Pro V1, and on some mishits, I was definitely noticing that the ball was spinning up quite a bit in comparison to the X, with RPMs hitting somewhere in the low 3000s at times, high 2000s. With the X, on the other hand, coming out quite a bit flatter, definitely seemed like it had a little bit more in the tank. And on very similar mishits where I was bleeding it out to the right a little bit, I was seeing something in the mid to high 2000 RPM range, which was giving me a little bit more distance on those mishits. In addition, that flatter ball flight coming out was resulting in about a 20-foot reduction in apex relative to the Pro V1. And then being I was getting a little tired near the tail end of this test today, and between testing the Callaway balls as well, there's quite a few swings that had happened throughout the day. So with a swing speed ranging from anywhere from 111 to 114 that I was able to see in this test, getting the ball speed where it was at and getting those distances where I was able to get them, I'm overall pleased with the performance of the Pro V1 and the Pro V1X for this portion of the test. So at the end of the day, which Pro V1 is it going to be and why? Let's break things out worst to first. The worst, and this is pretty obvious at this point in time if you've been watching the whole video, but the left dash. Pretty much out of the box and doing the bounce test, it really was not the kind of feel that I would be wanting out of a golf ball. And this is why it's really so important to be able to test these side by side, even if you're out on a course, to be able to hit these balls back to back in order to see how much different the feel of the golf ball can be, instead of just buying a dozen at the store and then just going out and playing them until you lose them and then moving on to the next box. Being able to play them side by side can really show you how much of a difference that feel and that feedback that you get from the golf ball is ultimately affecting how you are playing the game of golf. And if we look at the numbers for all four of the shots, we can see it's really not in line with my goal of trying to chase the TrackMan PGA Tour averages across the board. So we're seeing large differentiations in the overall apex across the three full golf shots that we are seeing there. And this kind of goes in line with one of the big tips that I've gotten over the years, is that you want to have a uniform apex on all of the full shot clubs throughout your bag. So that's going to be your pitching wedge apex looking the same as your 4-iron apex or your 5-iron apex, whatever kind of iron you have, and even your driver as well. And if you look at the TrackMan numbers, and you can see that on here, and if you go from their pitching wedge maxing out at 32 yards all the way up to their driver maxing out at 35 yards, everything is really kind of plus or minus 2 if we're looking on an average basis for that entire bag. Next up, and at a very close second to the winner of this test, is the Titleist Ball Fitting Tools pick of the Pro V1. And I really think that I could play either of these top two golf balls on the course and be totally fine. In fact, I have played the Pro V1 quite a bit over the summer. And even though it performed plenty well on the course, I did find myself being quite unhappy with the window that the ball is ultimately coming out at. And we could see that across the board when we're comparing them to the TrackMan numbers that we're hoping to work towards, especially in comparison to the X. So slightly higher launch numbers that we were seeing, and with that lower spin pretty much across the board. One thing I do like about this golf ball, after having some time on the course with it, I feel like on approaches into greens, I'm not seeing a bunch of spin on approach shots with wedges where you're ripping the golf ball back off the green. I feel like with the trajectory that I have with it, it hits on the green and it stops within a couple feet plus or minus of where that golf ball landed, which for me and my game is a little bit better from a control standpoint. It helps me go at certain parts of the green, and I don't necessarily have to worry about a golf ball spinning off the front uncontrollably, depending on the type of shot that I was hoping to hit. Last up and leading the pack in the Titleist lineup is the Pro V1X, which uniquely enough was Ballnamic's #1 ball choice for me in a previous video that I did on the channel. Pretty much across the board on all of the shots that we hit today, it came out as the lowest launching and the highest spinning in comparison to the other two golf balls. When I'm trying to picture how I want the golf ball to come off the club face and where I'm expecting it to be in the air when I look up, honestly, this ball is pretty much fulfilling that for me. I've been fighting that higher launch for quite a while, and just the fact that I was able to change into a golf ball that I didn't really think that ultimately would fit me, and without having to really adjust anything in my swing, it's just coming out 3+ degrees lower than it would be with a different golf ball that I had been playing in the past. And if we look at the numbers and looking for that overall uniformity on apex throughout the bag, especially in comparison to the Pro V1 and the left dash, you can see all three of these shots were in a pretty similar range of one another for overall apex. And so that's it for this portion of the Titleist test. And I have to say, it feels pretty good to have at least one golf ball nailed down for a specific OEM when I have this entire wall of golf balls to work my way through at some point in time by the end of the year here. And I will say, if there's one thing that I kind of took away from this test, is I was pretty surprised at how dramatic of a difference just the three golf balls ultimately had between one another. Whether that was spin rates, whether that was launch angles, or just that feel and how much that impacted, even to the point of with the left dash and how I was striking the golf ball. I largely underestimated the role of the golf ball ultimately determining how you're performing out on the course. I always knew that a premium ball was an important thing to have in the bag, and whether that's spin rates with the urethane cover and how you're able to control the spin of a golf ball. But I really did not know how in depth the engineering that went into these golf balls ultimately was, in just changing the launch angles and then having incremental spin differences between the three balls alone. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for tuning in. Questions, comments, or what's worked for you in the past, let me hear it down below in the comments. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more.